The USS Plainview was the American Navy ship built with one goal in mind: to take down the Soviet Union's underwater arsenal before the Soviets could ever get a chance to strike first. In deep, stormy seas, where ordinary combat ships are constantly battling against the waves, this new US Navy vessel did something no one expected. It didn't fight the waves. It bypassed them entirely. It literally flew above the water instead of floating through it. But if this ship was so advanced, so ahead of its time, what went wrong? What problems did it run into that eventually forced the US Navy to pull it out of service and decommission it for good? That's exactly what we're going to break down today. This story takes us back to the 1960s, a tense and complicated time in world history. After World War II had ended, a new kind of war had already begun: the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. This wasn't a war fought with soldiers charging into battlefields. It was a war fought through technology, intelligence, propaganda, and military buildup. Both superpowers were constantly trying to outdo each other, showing off their strength not just to one another, but to their allies and to the entire world. But by the 1960s, something had changed. The Soviet Union had quietly made a breakthrough that put all of that dominance at risk. The Soviets had developed a new generation of nuclear-powered submarines. Submarines so advanced that the US Navy simply had no reliable way to destroy them, even if it wanted to. These submarines were incredibly fast, capable of moving through the water at roughly 47 miles per hour. At the time, this was a shocking figure, because US Navy ships were nowhere near that quick. These Soviet submarines could also dive to depths of around 1,150 feet, disappearing far beneath the surface, well out of reach of American sonar systems and radar detection. In other words, the Soviets had built machines that could sneak up on American ships almost undetected, strike, and vanish before anyone even knew what happened. This put the United States in a genuinely dangerous position. Soviet submarines could trail American Navy vessels for miles without being noticed, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And even in situations where American ships did manage to detect something on the radar, there was very little they could actually do about it. The torpedoes and guided missiles of that era were simply too slow to catch up to these fast-moving Soviet submarines. It was a mismatch. America had the will to fight, but not yet the tools. As it turned out, the foundation for this kind of technology already existed. Back in 1906, long before anyone was thinking about Cold War submarines, an Italian engineer built a boat that could travel at remarkably high speeds, using a clever design involving underwater wings. Here's how it worked. These wings were mounted to the underside of the boat. As the boat gained speed, the pressure created by the water pushed against these wings and lifted them upward. This, in turn, lifted the body of the boat itself out of the water, so that only the wings remained in contact with the surface. With less of the boat actually touching the water, there was significantly less drag holding it back, and less drag meant more speed. This design became known as the hydrofoil, and it was a genuine engineering breakthrough for its time. After hydrofoils were introduced in 1906, the design slowly improved over the following decades. By the 1950s, hydrofoil technology had found its way into commercial yachts and pleasure boats, proving itself as a practical and reliable way to achieve high speeds on the water. When the US Navy took a serious look at this design, they liked what they saw. But there was a catch, and it was a significant one. Hydrofoils performed beautifully in calm water, like lakes or protected bays. But out in the open ocean, exactly where the Navy needed this technology most, the waves were far too rough and unpredictable. A hydrofoil boat that worked perfectly on a calm lake could easily be knocked off balance, or worse, damaged in real ocean conditions. This limitation is what pushed Navy engineers to rethink the entire hydrofoil design from the ground up. Instead of keeping the underwater wings at an angle, they redesigned them to sit completely flat in the water. This allowed ocean waves to pass through the gap between the boat's hull and the wings themselves, which meant the ship could maintain a much smoother, more stable ride, even in rougher seas. There was just one problem left to solve. With this new flat wing design, The wings needed to be adjusted constantly, almost in real time, to keep the boat level and stable no matter what the ocean was doing beneath it. This required incredibly precise, responsive engineering. Fortunately for the Navy, by the 1960s, this exact kind of control technology had finally become available. At this point, the US Navy became convinced that this improved hydrofoil design was the answer they had been looking for all along, a real solution to the Soviet submarine problem. A ship built on this design would, in theory, finally be fast enough to keep pace with and even outrun the Soviet Union's fastest submarines.
In 1970, 4 hydrofoil prototypes were completed. The largest and most impressive of them all was the USS Plainview, a massive 320-ton vessel that, at the time, was recognized as the largest high-speed hydrofoil ship ever built anywhere in the world. The Plainview was designed to be versatile. At lower speeds, it operated just like any conventional combat ship, moving through the water in a fairly ordinary way. But when the situation called for speed, hydraulic jacks would lower the ship's hydrofoils into position beneath the hull, transforming how the ship moved entirely. Powering this transformation were massive 14,000 horsepower engines that were remarkably adapted from the same power plants used in F-4 Phantom fighter jets. With these engines engaged and its hydrofoils deployed, the faster than the Soviet Union's fastest nuclear submarines. The ship also had the capability to have additional jet engines installed, which, if activated, could push its top speed to an astonishing 105 miles per hour, a speed that would have been almost unimaginable for a naval vessel just a decade earlier. On top of all this raw power, the Plainview was also equipped with a highly sophisticated automatic control system, one capable of continuously adjusting the hydrofoils to keep the ship stable even in ocean waves as high as 10 feet.
This was the kind of engineering achievement that, on paper, should have completely changed naval warfare. However, building these 4 hydrofoil ships wasn't quick, and it certainly wasn't cheap. The US Navy poured enormous amounts of money into the project, and the construction process ended up taking far longer than anyone had originally planned. By the time these ships were finally completed in 1974, new technology had emerged that allowed the Navy to track and target enemy submarines using helicopters instead, achieving the same strategic goal in a completely different and in many ways more practical manner. Instead of serving as the Cold War's ultimate submarine hunters, these ships were relegated to a much less glamorous role: fast coastal patrolling. And on top of losing their original strategic purpose, the hydrofoils came with a number of practical drawbacks that became harder to ignore over time. For one, the structural strength of these hydrofoil ships was significantly weaker compared to traditional combat vessels. This meant they simply couldn't carry as much weight with. On top of that, these ships consumed fuel at a much higher rate than conventional ships, which made them far less cost-effective to operate over the long run. Looking at the bigger picture, this entire hydrofoil experiment by the US Navy achieved only limited success. While it was undeniably an impressive feat of engineering, plenty of people within the military and the government were openly critical of it from the very beginning. In America's broader effort to project strength and stay ahead of the Soviet Union, the hydrofoil program became something of a controversial subject. Many critics argued that the Navy's budget was being wasted on a solution that could realistically be achieved through far cheaper and more practical means.
Despite this criticism, the pressures of the ongoing Cold War meant that the program wasn't scrapped entirely. 6 hydrofoil ships were eventually built specifically for coastal patrol duties. These vessels were named the Pegasus-class hydrofoils, and they remained in active service for roughly 10 years. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union finally collapsed, bringing the decades-long Cold War to an end. With the original threat gone, there was no longer any real strategic need for these specialized, expensive ships. By 1994, the Pegasus-class hydrofoils, along with the legacy of the Plainview program, were officially decommissioned for good. The ship that once soared above the waves, faster than almost anything else on the water in its era, now sits as nothing more than a rusting wreck along the coast of Astoria. A quiet, forgotten reminder of just how far the United States was willing to go to win the Cold War. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like and share it.
Thank you so much for all your kind and thoughtful comments. I'll see you in the next great video.